All right, we are here with State Representative Jim Lyons, representative for the 19th, 18th Essex District, which includes a little bits of everywhere, 4 or 5 different communities, part of Tewksbury, Andover, Boxford, North Andover. But thank you for taking the time for joining us for this interview. We appreciate it.
Hey, Bill, thank you very much, and thanks for all you're trying to do, making sure that the communities are know the differences or the similarities between candidates. I've listened to almost all of your podcasts, and I appreciate your efforts, and I think it's real important that people know where each of the candidates stand.
Well, we thank you for that. I'll start with a question that I've been asking everybody, and in your case, as an incumbent, you've served for a while now. This would be going on. You're looking for your 4th term, 3rd term.
I've served 4 terms.
You've served 4 terms.
That's right.
All right. So, every time an incumbent has to make that decision, they go through the process. Am I going to run again? What made you decide this time to run one more time, seek another term?
So I think the thing that motivates me is that I really believe that Beacon Hill is broken. I believe the system on Beacon Hill has become very corrupt, and I think we can look at that when you look at the 3 out of the last 4 speakers of the House have been indicted and convicted. You've got a speaker who's an unindicted co-conspirator. That's on the House side. You go to the Senate side, and you have a Senate president who had to resign because his husband was selling influence for sex. You've got the majority leader right under the Senate president, who was indicted on a 113-count bribery charge. And when you look at that, and having served in the legislature, who is that hurting? It's hurting the taxpayers and the hard-working families of Massachusetts, because if we don't have balance on Beacon Hill, this is what we get. We get people who are more interested in self-serving than they are of serving the public. And I want to go in there, and since day one has made my focus the only special interest that I represented, the taxpayers and the hard-working families. That's the driving force behind it, that I think as a business owner since I was 21 years old, as a person who's raised this family. My wife and I have raised our children here. We've run our business in Tewksbury, since the early 90s. We've had hundreds of kids work with us. We have a real perspective. We're part of the community, and I believe my business background and the fact that I've been able to go into Beacon Hill and speak passionately and politely about the issues that are important absolutely gives some balance to what goes on Beacon Hill. And that's what drives me. It drives me every day, and I see what's going on, and the fact that Beacon Hill is run by a group of folks at the top whose influence has far-reaching impact on all of us, and I think we have to change that.
You have been referred to as the voice of the loyal opposition, because as you say, it's a very Democrat-heavy legislature. Do you feel that you have been able, because you certainly have been consistent in your criticism and consistent in your positions, in being as a Republican on Beacon Hill, in being such a small part of the minority, do you feel that you have been able to be effective in trying to achieve some of those goals that you're talking about, in making some of that change?
I think given the fact that the Democrats are spending almost $250,000 to silence my voice, I think we've been very effective. We've been very effective because we've raised issues that annoy the Democrats to no end. They want people to sit in the corner and be told what to do, and they know that I won't do that. And as far as my effectiveness, I said I really think you have to look at one of my most important issues that I'm involved in, and that's the opiate epidemic. I have made that a cornerstone of what I'm trying to fight about. Our family understands that issue firsthand. One of our sons is involved and is struggling with his addiction. And in 2014, we went to Governor Baker right after he got elected, and we talked to him about it. And in 2015, I filed a budget amendment to the state budget to increase funding to recovery homes. For 8 years, the rate that recovery homes were reimbursed by the state had remained stagnant at $75. And having served on the Public Health Committee, John McGann, who is the Vice President of the Behavioral Collaboration, came forward and said, we're in the midst of an epidemic. It costs us more to take care of these people that are suffering. We need to change the way we do business. So I filed a budget amendment and ended up working with the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Brian Dempsey. My son and I brought Brian to the Gavin Foundation, to the Cushing House. And initially, there was no funding put in the budget. And Brian and I and other members of the Democratic leadership went over there. And my son actually gave a speech about how important recovery and treatment is. And after that meeting, Brian actually sat and watched some of the clients there. After that meeting, Brian went back and we had a meeting, and he said, we're going to find a way to get money into the budget. And they ended up increasing the rate. We had to work with the administration to change the regulation from 75 to 125. It actually got to 105 or $110. That's effective. That's leadership. That's addressing a problem. That's working with people who disagree with me, but we had a common goal. And the Democrats, they know that I'm passionate about what I believe in, but they also know that I go about it in a very non-personal way. This is what I believe in. That's what you believe in. Look, I went to Brandeis. 9 of my best friends are my most liberal friends. And I had to learn over the years how to make my issues and make my points effectively. And I've learned to do that. And you can talk to the Democrats on Beacon Hill. They know that I'm not just up there making a speech. They know that I'm passionate. And when I'm up there, I believe it. And I think that's what I bring to the table. I bring real passion about real common folks' issues that need to be spoken about. And it offends me that Beacon Hill has become such a closed group of people at the top. Brian Dempsey, on the other hand, was just a terrific guy to work with, as was the chairman, the new chairman that we had, who unfortunately isn't going to be back, Jeffrey Sanchez. Terrific guys.
I had an opportunity. I didn't have an opportunity to talk to you because it was a mob scene, as you know. But I happened to be there at over in North Andover the other night and heard you speak about your son, and heard you take offense at what you feel has been an unfair criticism and an inaccurate criticism of your lack of support in the area of the opiate epidemic. I know that the new recovery house, the Into Action Recovery House, is not in your section of Tewksbury. That was something that Jim Maselli was involved with when he was alive. Were you pleased to see a recovery house like that established in a community like Tewksbury, in a suburban community like Tewksbury?
Well, there are already recovery homes. I'm on a board of directors of a sober house of a recovery home in Tewksbury.
Okay.
So I believe that we need to provide these types of facilities. So absolutely, and those folks, I'm personally friends with those people, and I've met them. My wife and I have met them, and we know their story and the fact that one of the people really involved lost their son. That young man was had got to know my son. So yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be reaching out. This epidemic and this disease is so devastating to the individuals and the families involved. We as people have to, we have to understand that You know what it is, Bill? A lot of people don't understand until they have to deal with it.
Sure, exactly.
And that's what it is. We have this is a disease that is, as my wife and I look at, a generation is being destroyed.
Sure. One of the things that, and it ties in with opiates and addiction, that you have been a champion of has been cutting back on the budget item for Medicaid, for state health care. Tell me and tell the voters, because I think it can be a little confusing with Mass Health, with the Health Connector. A lot of small business people, their insurance through the Health Connector. So when you talk about that being a huge budget item and wanting to reduce that, explain a little bit about what you would like to see done to reduce that burden on the taxpayers.
So what's happened is, about 8 years ago, Mass Health was 30% of the state budget, and at that point it was about $10 billion. Today it's 43% of the state budget, and almost $18 billion. It's unsustainable growth. So what's going to happen if we don't get our arms around it is that everybody's going to get hurt, and the people who should be benefiting from Mass Health are the ones that are going to get hurt the most. So my concern is that we have a system that's out of control, and the budget process is out of control because of the size of and scope of Mass Health. We are not controlling the number of people that go on the program. Right now, a third of the population in Massachusetts is on Mass Health. That's unsustainable. We had a record increase in the last years of the Deval Patrick administration, where able-bodied folks joined at the rate of an 82% increase, 465,000 new people that came onto it. We had people leaving businesses, right, to join Mass Health. That's not what we should be doing. And I put a proposal together that said that anybody above the poverty line, all right, we have 725,000 people in Massachusetts at or below the poverty line, disabled and elderly.
Right.
All right, that should be, as that should be in a lockbox.
Right.
All right, that should be there. That's what the goal of Mass Health was when
Right.
we founded it, and we shouldn't change that. However, if we're going to start adding people to it, which is what we've done, we have to have some of those folks sharing the burden. I put in place an amendment to the budget, which would have had, on a sliding scale, an average of $2,000 per household who are above the poverty line based on their own income. You know, it had to be income. It had to be based on their income, and that's how we have people making over $100,000 that are on Mass Health, and some of them aren't paying anything. Well, that's not fair.
Now let's clarify this, because I think this is where it gets confusing.
Yeah.
When you talk about those people,
Yeah.
or people making a living, and maybe they're self-employed or
Right,
whatever,
right.
and you say they're on Mass Health,
Right.
are they just getting their insurance through the Health Connector, in which they are then assigned a carrier like Tufts or Blue Cross, or are you saying that they're getting it through basically the Mass Health, completely state funded, as you say, not paying anything?
So that's a great question, and we've been working diligently to get that answer.
Okay.
So you're talking about the connector, and you're talking about Mass Health.
Right, and I think that confuses a lot.
It
of people.
does confuse, but there's not. See, the connector, there's only maybe 500,000 people, I think, on the connector. We're talking about 1.9 million people. So what we want to make sure that if there are people on Mass Health who are 3 times above the poverty limit, we want to make sure that they share in the burden. And right now, the information, Mass Health has become a huge organization, and we want to make sure that we put in place those kinds of mechanisms that people share in the burden. That's billions of dollars if we're only charging them on an average $2,000. That's a significant cost. And when you look at local aid going from $5 billion to 5,300,000,000 at the same time that Mass Health goes from 8 billion to 16 billion. If we now bring back $3.5 billion, we've increased local aid by 60%. And that's the kind of funding that really helps our local communities provide education, provide police, and provide fire. Every year we see these local towns struggling to get through their budgets. We see property taxes increasing by 40 and 50% over an 8-year period. If we continue down this road, we're not solving the problem. We're just putting more and more dollars into a problem that needs to be changed. And that's why I'm fundamentally, people say, why do you vote no? I vote no because it's unsustainable. We just can't keep doing what we're doing. And I think that's in a nutshell, Bill. When you have 43% of your state budget, you've got to go after the big part of the budget first, and that's why we're going after it.
Right.
We're not trying to throw any. So the response is automatic. Lyons wants to throw people off. You know that people that need help. We have a job as a society to be there to help people, but at the same time we have to do it in an efficient and cost-effective manner.
So, and to that end, some people have said, oh, he wants to slash the budget. But it sounds like, and I know there's things that you would like to see reduced. I know you'd like to see the income tax go back to 5%. But it also sounds like it's not so much that you want to see a slash and burn to the budget as much as you want to see it reallocated to better use in other areas, like you said, with local aid and such.
We've got a $40 billion state budget. I think the way we're spending our money is inappropriate. I think when we've got local communities that are suffering, local property taxes that are going up, you bring money back to our cities and towns, you put downward pressure on property taxes, you give communities the money that they have to operate, you're doing a number of things, right? You've got programs that can be provided at the local level. You're allowing people, to have a break on their property taxes, particularly the seniors, so people can stay in their homes. And you're providing where I believe the dollars can best be spent at the local level. You're getting it out of the hands of the bureaucrats on Beacon Hill. And that's what I want to see happen.
Does that basically kind of frame your view of, instead of a top-down government structure, federal, state, local, that you, as a conservative, want to see more of a broad local government, local control, local funding, smaller on the state level, smaller on the federal level, that type of a thing?
No question about it. I believe our tax dollars are best spent by those in our local community, the people of Tewksbury, the people of Andover, the people of Boxford, and the people of North Andover. We have quality people who run at the local level. They're capable of knowing how to spend their money. This idea that the bureaucrats and the elites on Beacon Hill have to tell them what to do is fundamentally against everything I believe in. Local control, local government, that's what we ought to focus on. We have a tax structure that raises a lot of money in Massachusetts, and I think we do a poor job allocating that money right now. And I think Governor Baker has tried diligently to reform some of these programs. Unfortunately, we talk about the issue that we began this conversation, balance. There's not enough of us on Beacon Hill to provide him. Every single veto override that he had, I would, for the most part, supported, and we can't even sustain any of his vetoes. The Democrats have total control, and total control hurts the taxpayers.
Tell me about the district. You've got 4 towns, which for a state representative district is a lot. That's tough. Do you find that there are a lot of differences in the towns, or are there more similarities in the towns that you cover?
So the way I've approached being a state representative is to talk about broad principles. When I talk about broad principles, I'm talking about less government regulation, less taxation, more local control. Those resonate across the entire district. And then you talk about the specific issues that resonate among all of our communities. The opiate epidemic is certainly one of them. Local aid to our cities and towns is another one. Transportation and roads, education, all of those go across the entire district. So Yeah, it is a district that runs from Boxford to Tewksbury. It's a diverse group of people, but I think the issues kind of resonate. There, you'll have occasionally an issue in one community that you won't have in another community, but for the most part, when you're talking broad principles, I let that's kind of where I lead with all my messaging.
You have been very strong in your positions on illegal immigration. I think that by and large, people are not fans of people who are illegal immigrants who are drug dealers or violent criminals or whatnot. How would you like to see families that basically the only law that they've broken is that they are here illegally? How would you like to see those situations handled? How would you like to see law enforcement and whatnot handle these families that are living here?
So my focus is what you said: illegal immigrants who are in here violating our law. 80% on a recent study done in the city of Chelsea by Lieutenant Betts indicated that the drug trafficking is being done by illegals. That has to become our primary focus. When you are looking at an opiate epidemic, you have to get to the source, and we now know that the source is, at least in the city of Chelsea, 80%, and we believe throughout the meccas of the places that there are big drugs, that a lot of that is coming from illegal immigrants. Look at the arrest that was just made in Lawrence the other day.
That's right. Big arrest, yeah.
Big arrest, all illegals. So that's number one. I'm gonna share with you a story. I got a call about a year ago, maybe less than a year ago. A woman had been arrested because she was an illegal immigrant, and that was it. She was arrested because she was an illegal immigrant. What happened was her and her husband had a dispute, and he was filing for divorce.
Sure.
He called the immigration office on his wife. The police arrested this woman and put her in the Suffolk courthouse, Suffolk jail.
Yeah.
I called, got an immigration attorney involved in the case, and got that woman out. That's not what we ought to be doing.
Okay.
What we ought to be doing is focusing on these people that are violently and viciously destroying people's lives in America. And that should be our priority right now, front and center.
Along that line, do you see, and I've heard this said by some people, that if that approach is taken, what you're saying, that you're going to get more communication, more help for law enforcement from people within the community if they happen to be here illegally, if they're not afraid of getting picked up, that they'll help out more with letting law enforcement know who the drug dealers and the violent criminals are?
I think we know who they are. I mean, I don't ascribe to that notion. I ascribe to the notion that we as local police and local authorities should be working with federal immigration to solve this drug problem. And I think if we did that and it became the norm, then we would be helping two things. We would be getting rid of illegal people that are in here to cause harm to the United States of America who are selling drugs,
Sure.
and would be helping with this opiate epidemic. So I think that is such an important thing. And then the other thing that we've got judges like this Judge Feely who are putting these folks back out on the street. That's one of the areas my opponent and I completely disagree on. She supports, I read your article that you wrote in the paper, giving these judges, this judge has done it five different times. He put a heroin dealer back out in the street because he said it was a money crime. He put a man who was charged with having guns illegally, lowered his bail. He went and killed a police officer. Put a sex offender back out in the street who's still roaming the streets of our district. Put back out on the street a man who strangled a puppy, his girlfriend's puppy.
I read that. Yeah.
And threatened to kill her. He put him back on the street, and finally, just last week, 2 weeks ago, he put back on the street a man who drugged and raped 2 children, and then was ready to be back on the street, and the state uncovered that he had tried to hire somebody to murder the victims. Fortunately, the state stepped in, and that guy's behind bars. Judge Feely should be removed from office. Major difference between me and my opponent. Me and my opponent on the sanctuary state and on illegal immigrants, night and day. She has said that she's the polar opposite. She's right. She supports sanctuary state. I don't. She supports raises for the hierarchy on Beacon Hill, the speaker, the $60,000 raises. I don't. You know, she claims that she supports the criminal. Her discussion of my position on the criminalization of the drug abusers was absolutely 1,000% a lie, and it should not have happened. So we are different.
Right.
You know, she wants to raise your taxes. I don't. So you have a clear-cut choice in this race between an opponent who is being funded by the bureaucrats, and power brokers on Beacon Hill, and everybody else throughout America, and me, who wants to represent the people of Tewksbury and the people of this district.
You mentioned, to continue on Judge Feely, judicial responsibility, judicial accountability has been a recurring theme of yours. It happened during the course of the issue that you were involved with DCF.
That's right.
Judicial accountability is a thing. As I understand it right now, the legislative body is the accountability body for the judicial branch. Is that correct, as it stands now?
It's constitutionally written, and it was written in 1779. The Constitution has been amended 42 times, and this has never been amended. The legislature has the duty and constitutional authority to remove judges. Speaker DeLeo isn't doing his job. When you have a judge who does 5 things, we have an obligation to bring that forward, debate it, discuss it, and vote on it. If people want to keep them, at least take the vote. And that's the type of stuff that's going on Beacon Hill. Speaking about the power broker structure, I think it's important to go back to the judges, to the pay raises of the legislature.
Sure.
The chairman, the speaker, the Senate president got these massive pay raises in January of 2017.
Right.
My opponent is being supported by all of those people. So I tell people the story. In November of 2016, we applied for a job. We got the job interview, and the people elected us to go serve in the legislature.
Sure.
January 17th, the first thing that we do, our first day of work, what happens is the power structure, the speaker and the Senate president, come forward and say, all right, we're going to give ourselves a $50,000 or $60,000 raise. So 6 weeks after they get the job, and they knew what the price was before, they knew how much they were going to get paid before, they come in and they say, we're going to give ourselves a $60,000 raise. How many people in the private sector would get a job interview, get hired, and the first day of work go in and say, look, I want a $60,000 raise? They would throw you out so fast your head would spin. That's the speech I made on the House floor. I said, this is an outrage that we are doing this. And we are doing it, and you want to know why they do it? Because they can.
Right.
They've got the votes. And that's why I'm in there every day banging away at that type of behavior. And they don't like it. They don't like it, Bill.
And you mentioned about, just to circle back on the judge accountability. If the legislative body isn't going to take action, would you want to see the state constitution amended to make judges elected positions instead of appointed?
So I don't particularly think that that's the way to go. I think
Okay.
legislatively there are other ways for us to do it
Yep.
without having to change it and make it elected.
Yep.
I think what we could do is certainly put in legislatively a review process that every 7 years or every 5 years, the judges have to come back and be reviewed before the governor's council again, and that, their record is brought forth. And let's just give Judge Feely's, let's just say he was
Sure.
up for a review, and people could come in and they could say, look at what this judge has done. All right?
Right.
And now the governor's council has to decide, do we want to keep him?
Right.
So I think there are ways for us to put in place, but we don't have to give up the constitutional authority that we have. We could do that in conjunction with the fact that the legislature could still do it. But if we had, I think, a system in place, that would certainly make a lot of sense.
You have, you mentioned about the power structure, and you mentioned about, earlier you mentioned about not having the votes to uphold Governor Baker's vetoes, which definitely hamstrings, what he may want to be doing. You have done some campaigning and some appearances and some speaking on behalf of other Republican candidates. How important is it in what you're trying to accomplish or what you want to see to get more Republican, more conservative voices into the state legislature, into the state Senate, into the House?
I think it's critically important. I think this is a long-term process. When I first ran in 2010, there were only 11 Republicans running for re-election in the Commonwealth. Right now we're at 34. Now that's not the numbers, but when you look at it percentage-wise, we're growing. Governor Baker lends tremendous credibility to the Republican brand in Massachusetts. He's figured out how to make government better. Governor Baker and I don't agree on everything,
Right.
but Governor Baker at the same time understands that his role as governor is to run the state and run it effectively on behalf of everybody.
Right.
And I think if we as Republicans learn that what we need to do is go out and have a message, that understands the fiscal side of it, but also understands the compassionate side of government, I think we can build our brand and ultimately bring more balance to Beacon Hill. And balance is going to benefit our constituents. Even the Democrats believe that.
Excellent. And I guess the last question would be, if you get reelected for another 2 years, what is your message to the voters of basically what your priorities would be for the next 2 years?
So my priorities are going to remain pretty consistent. Number one, as I tell people on the doorsteps, my goal is to protect the taxpayer and to work on behalf of the taxpayer. And that's what I'm going to continue to do every day that I'm in there. I'm going to continue to fight on this opiate epidemic and continue to make that, one of my top priorities, if not my top priority. I'm going to continue to expose what I see to be the real hypocrisy of Beacon Hill. We have a public records law in Massachusetts. I have filed amendments every year to eliminate the exemption that the legislature has. And I think if we're talking about open and transparent, my point to the power structure is open and transparent for everybody but us. I mean, everybody says, we want to be open and transparent except us.
Right.
I mean, we have to open the process, and I'm going to continue to take on the power structure and remind people that our job is not to serve ourselves. Our job is to serve the families and hardworking taxpayers of the district. That's my message since the day I walked in there, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Excellent. Excellent. We have been talking to Jim Lyons, state representative for the 18th Essex district, representing a section of Tewksbury, North Andover, Andover, and Boxford. And we appreciate the time you've given us today.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you, Bill.
Oh, and I should say I'd be remiss if I didn't. If people want to find out more about you, more about your campaign and whatnot, where can they find that? How can they find that information?
Right at my website, jimlyons.org.
Excellent. All right. Again, we appreciate the time.
Thanks so much.